Hello, everyone, and welcome to Navigating Project Development, your starting point. Hopefully, you can all hear and see us okay. If you could maybe just quickly write yes or hello or something like that, just to let us know that it's all working well, that would be lovely. That would be really, really good. So if you could just mention in the Q&A function that you can see us, that would be great. Yes. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yes, and hello. Hello, everyone, and welcome to, we will get started now. So I first would like to introduce myself. My name is Elena Miles, and I'm the Partnership Manager with ClimatePartner Impact. And here I also have Usman, who will also be doing part of the session today. Usman will be presenting Earth observation and specifically how we use Earth observation technology and tools to monitor the quality of our projects. So let's get started. But before we do that, just a couple of very quick points for you. We will record today's session and the recording will be available to you at the end. During the session, we will be covering many different topics. So if you have a burning question, don't leave it until the end. Type it in our chat box. And we have our lovely colleague Buju in the background who will be answering your questions. In addition to that, we have left some time at the end of the session today to make sure we answer some of your questions live. So who are ClimatePartner and ClimatePartner Impact, and why do we have expertise to talk about climate project development? Well, in case you're not familiar with us, ClimatePartner Group is an end-to-end climate solutions provider. We have over 20 years experience in the market, and we have over 500 experts all around the world, helping over 6,000 corporate clients. We have expertise in every aspect of climate action solutions, from calculating your carbon footprint to setting reduction pathways, including things like science-based targets. We work with you to help you reduce your emissions, work with your supply chain, and also contribute to impactful climate projects. Usman and I work for ClimatePartner Impact, which is as an in-house climate project developer for ClimatePartner. And what we do is develop impactful projects for our clients and also external clients as well. And our big focus area are both really healing the planet and the environment, but also making huge difference through our projects to local communities. And we'll talk about that today. So specifically today, we are dive really deep into carbon project development. We will start by thinking about why it's such an important topic and why companies should get interested and involved in carbon projects. We'll then talk about specifically how it fits within your climate strategy, and we'll share some things that our clients are doing. But then a really big part of today, and I think that's a really exciting part, will be about what happens on the ground. How do we decide on the project? How do we conduct due diligence? How do we work with local communities? And then how do we monitor our projects? And a really, really big part of it will be Usman's contribution. Well, he'll talk about how we use satellite data, drones, and other Earth observation methods to really ensure the quality of our projects. And in the end, to bring it all together, I will share with you a case study from one of our clients, just to see how it all comes together as a part of our strategy, and also share some other practical insights from the many corporate clients that we work with. But to start this conversation, I think it's really important to take a step back and understand why we're all here. Why are we even having this discussion about carbon project development? And of course, we all know that the climate change is escalating and we all must act urgently. And we all must act together and use every single tool available at the moment. What often frustrates me in having conversation with people that are not so familiar with the science is they think that 1.5 degree target is some sort of political number that is just a made up target, and it's something to strive for. It's not so important. But of course, it's not. It is a physical boundary. And unfortunately, the rate at which we are going at the moment, it's looking like we are going to have a very challenging time unless we act decisively to get there. In fact, we have already surpassed the safety limit. If you look at the latest UN emissions gap report, the pathway that we are on now is more towards 2.6 to 3.1 degrees. And that reality would be terrifying. So that's the really scary news. The good news is that same report confirms that 1.5 degree target is still technically achievable, but that window is closing rapidly. So every single part of the society must mobilize to solve this issue. So it's not going to be a debate about, is it the government's job? Is it the individual's job? Is it the company's? It has to be everyone all together at the same time. And unfortunately, at different times, the governments are more or less active in this space, but the issue doesn't go away. Once again, it's not a political issue. And that's why at ClimatePartner, we really believe in corporate involvement. And the corporates have a decisive role to play in this space for many, many different reasons. Corporates are some of the biggest emitters there are, without a doubt. So, of course, there's a lot to be done in reducing those emissions. But corporates also have a huge influence on consumer behavior, on governments, and also on their supply chains. Many of our clients are large corporates that are now telling their suppliers that they have to calculate their emissions, that they have to set science-based targets. And we can see the huge flow-on effect that corporates could have. But if you're a corporate and you want to make an impactful contribution to climate action, what does that actually look like? What do you need to do, and how does that fit within your strategy? And there are many different ways to think about it, but I guess a starting point would be to think about setting a net zero target. And there are many different standards, and the one that I'm sharing here today is Science-Based Target Initiative, which is one of the biggest non-for-profit bodies that helps companies set and monitor these types of targets. And there are many others. But I think this gives you a really great framework as a corporate to think about, how do I make impactful climate action? So let's just have a look at this graph here. Effectively, as a corporate, there are three things that you would need to do to achieve net zero. Number one is focusing on internal reductions. So that's really, really important. And as you all know, there's scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, which is the trickiest one. But that is absolutely something that companies must work towards. And they must set the net zero target. And the latest by which it could possibly happen will be 2050. And of course, some companies that are not so emissions heavy could have much earlier targets. Number two, and this is really important, and I feel that this is the part of the conversation that often gets missed, is that while the companies are doing amazing job focusing on internal reductions, they're still emitting, and most of them are still emitting quite heavily. In fact, there are calculations that say that on average, by the time a company has gone to their net zero, they would have emitted 15 times of their carbon footprint, which is huge. So it's really important not just to have this tunnel vision and only focusing on internal reductions. It's really important to look beyond your value chain and contribute to the global net zero by investing in impactful climate projects. And part three is then neutralization. So Science-Based Targets Initiative says, okay, well, even if you've done everything you can to fully decarbonize, for most industries, there's going to be a portion of your emissions, which will be between 5 to 10%, that they call unabatable, which means you basically cannot reduce them. And at that point, you've gotten to your net zero, but you still have those 5 to 10% of unabatable emissions. And at that point, those emissions must be neutralized with permanent carbon removals. So those three steps all are really, really essential. And where carbon projects play an important role are the last two, which is contribution beyond your value chain and neutralization. But what sort of projects should you invest in? And there's so many different technologies out there. There are technological removals, such as direct air capture. There are nature-based solutions. There, everything in between, such as biochar, enhanced rock weathering, and many, many others. And they're all important. For us at Climate Partner Impact, we have a variety of different solutions. And as our global group, Climate Partner Group, we have access to all of these technologies. But what we feel particularly passionate about are nature-based solutions. And that's really going to be the focus of today. Nature-based solutions can really accelerate the path to net zero. So what do I mean by nature-based solutions? It's basically projects such as afforestation, blue carbon, regenerative agriculture, projects that use nature to solve some of the biggest problems that we're currently facing today. And these solutions alone can provide a third of the cost-effective climate mitigation that we need between now and 2030. But what is probably even more exciting about these solutions and these technologies is that they always have a whole host of additional benefits. Things like restoring biodiversity, providing livelihood to local communities, building financial resilience, improving food and water security, and many, many, many others. And while we think that all carbon removal technologies are very important, nature is already here, it's highly scalable, and at the moment, it's one of the lowest impactful way of removing carbon. However, the funding gap is huge. To achieve those 2/3 of climate mitigation that we need, we have an annual gap of $4.3 trillion that we need to close. And that is why when we talk to companies about making impactful contribution to climate, we always talk about both reducing internally and contributing to the global net zero. And both are really, really important. We are really at a stage as a humanity where we have absolutely no time to waste. We must act urgently. We must do everything that we can. And for companies, that means both reducing and contributing. If you think about the industrialized societies, we have unfortunately caused many of the problems associated with climate change, but it is many of the communities in the global south that are feeling the impacts of those actions the most. And that's why we feel very strongly that it's both focusing on internal reductions, but also contributing globally and empowering communities that need that the most. Today, I will practically talk about what that might look like if you decide to get involved and contribute to a climate project. And that is really, really important because there's a bit of a gap in understanding for many clients. What actually happens when we develop our projects? How do we choose a project? How do we do due diligence? And that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. I'll talk to you about every single step that we follow using a real life case study of one of our projects just to bring it to life. But before I get into that, what I do want to talk about is that there are two very distinct phases in the carbon project development. The first phase is all about setting up the project and pre-investment, then the due diligence. And the second phase is once your project has been set up, it's all about monitoring it, getting external auditor to come in and provide verification and the issuance of carbon credits. So the stages are quite distinct, and I'll talk about what happens in every stage. So let's get into it. And like I said, to make it very practical and to really kind of have you picture what happens on the ground, we're going to use one of our projects, and that project is our Rwanda Bamboo River Restoration Project. In this project, we are planting 1,000 kilometers of clumping bamboo along the river banks in Rwanda. Now, the reason why we're planting clumping bamboo there is if you look at the pictures sort of at the bottom, as you can see, the soil over the many years has become really unstable and has really eroded. So as a result, constantly over many years, the local communities, particularly farmers, would get flooded and constantly use their crop, which of course had devastating consequences on those communities. So with this project, we worked together with the Rwanda Water Board, which is the government authority, to solve this problem for them. So basically, there was an issue that needed to be solved, but there was no funding available, publicly or privately. And that's really a good example of where carbon finance comes in. When this funding is not available, through establishing a carbon project and commercializing, we are able to provide the solutions to the community. So the solution that we are providing there is planting the clumping bamboo along the riverbanks. And bamboo, of course, grows very quickly, and the roots bind the soil very, very quickly. And effectively, what we're creating are what's known as riparian buffer zones. So imagine like those buffer zones along the rivers, which protect the local communities from the rivers. So there's no longer flooding, there's no longer landslides, and it also improves the local biodiversity and the water quality. So let's see what we did in that project at every step of the project development lifecycle. So, of course, every project starts with an idea. But before we commit a lot of time, money, and energy to the project, typically there's a pilot study, which would usually be 2 to 3 years, where we plant a small area of the intended species in that particular area, and kind of we're going to see how it goes. We're testing the integration, the climate. Is it suitable for this type of soil? What are the mortality rates? And that's a really good way to kind of test it out. At that point, we also will start conversations with the local stakeholders, including the local governments and community. Then the next step would be the due diligence, and that step is huge. So let's say your feasibility study is successful. We first start with a high-level screening where we'll look at the technical model, the context, the historical land use, the carbon calculations, and Usman will talk a lot about all of that. But once we've done that and that's looking good, then we get into really comprehensive due diligence. But just to give you an idea, only 5% of the projects that we screen actually pass our due diligence, because the process is so robust and there's so many different factors that we're looking at. But just to give you an idea of what we're looking at, there is things like historical land use. We'll look at the country profile, we'll look at the carbon regulation, we'll look at land rights, a whole heap of different factors. A big part of this is also starting to engage with the local communities. Our projects can only be successful if not only are the local communities on board, but more importantly, they are really enthusiastic about the project, because we need their cooperation, and many of them will be our employees, so will be very involved in the project. So that part is really, really important, and it starts very early on. At the same time as we're doing the due diligence, our project developers are preparing a PDD, a project design document, which will be used to register the project with an internationally recognized standard, such as Vera or Gold Standard. We also start the implementation at that point, which means actually planting the bamboo, engaging employees. And typically what we do is we have a really experienced and knowledgeable implementation partner on board that we work with, that has really strong relationship with local communities, that does a lot of that implementation. And as we're implementing, we're also working on all the documentation for the standard. And once that is completed, we are going through the process to get the project validated and registered. And what that looks like is that we have an auditor that flies in to the area and basically checks that everything is looking good. So they confirm the land rights, carbon rights, they bid the local community. They basically check that the project is set up as it should. And once that's done, and they spend several days there, and they're very, very technical in that particular technology, in that particular area. Once they've done all this and they have validated, the project is validated, then the project can be registered with, for example, Vera or Gold Standard. And while that is happening, also we are doing extensive maintenance as well. So for example, just keeping it again practical, here we've got bamboo. After planting bamboo, we have at least 2 years of maintenance activities. So that includes things like mortality counts, replacing plants that didn't survive. There might be, often there are a lot of weeds around the bamboo, which of course compete for nutrients. And those must be, and water, and those must be removed. So there's a lot of maintenance that is happening to ensure that it's growing beautifully and everything is going as it should. And that last step of maintenance would be the last step of phase 1 of the project development lifecycle. And after that step, once the project is registered, it starts issuing credits. The important thing about this step is, for us at ClimatePartner Impact, we actually go in and we invest in our own projects, and we bring it to this end of this phase 1, basically. So when we start talking to our corporate investors about our projects, by then, most of our projects have been validated and many of them are already registered. So most of them are 1 or 2 years away from issuing carbon credits, which is really, really fantastic for our investors because it really de-risks the project for them. So it's very different, investing to some, in a piece of paper with an idea versus, most of them will go and visit the project and see the bamboo growing and meet the local communities. And of course, it gives them a lot more certainty and security. And then once it's all set up, then the exciting part 2 starts, which is all about issuing the credits. And that, of course, has a number of different steps, but the 3 most important steps there are effectively a cycle of monitoring, verification, and issuance and delivery. And monitoring, of course, involves a number of different steps. And Usman will spend a lot of time talking about what we do from the Earth observation side of things. But it includes both monitoring on the ground and monitoring in the office in Munich using our Earth observation technology. But then every 1 to 5 years, depending on the project, we again have an independent auditor fly in. And every time it has to be a different auditor to ensure that there's no bias. And that auditor visits the project, they measure the carbon sequestration. Again, they check that everything is going as it should. And once they have done that, what happens is the carbon credits or VERs are issued, and of course they're delivered to our client. So this cycle kind of continues until the end of the project, and the projects have different timeframes. Some of our projects are 10 years, some are 40 years, and everything in between, depending on the technology. But then in the end, when the crediting periods end for the carbon project, that's the end of the carbon project life cycle. But of course, the forest remains, and we would always have agreements with the governments, with the communities. Sometimes it's the way we structure land ownership, that often that area is in conservancy and cannot be used for anything else in the future to ensure the permanence of the project. So that's kind of a very quick overview for you of what happens on the ground. But I just realized it didn't kind of work with the clicking. But anyway, they're the pictures for you. But what I really want to do now is hand over to Usman, who will kind of bring it together and talk about what his team does at various steps of due diligence and monitoring to ensure the quality of the projects. How do they manage risk, and how do they yeah, ensure that everything works beautifully. So I'll now hand over to Usman. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Let's stop the slide. Uh, Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today. I hope this session is going to be very interesting. We will explore how Earth observation technology are helping us to ensure the high quality project. We will cover the concept of due diligence that Alina talked about, and we'll talk about how it helps us in successfully implementation of our projects. By the end of this part, you will have a clear understanding of how we utilize Earth observation to assess the land suitability of our project, how we do the eligibility analysis, and how we mitigate the risk that is associated with the project. And we'll also cover the topic of monitoring our project implementation. So let's get started. First, we talk about what Earth observation is. Earth observation is a process of gathering information about the Earth's surface, about the water, about the atmosphere, and it is either performed via field measurements, which is in situ data collection, or through remote sensing, or combination of both. What is remote sensing? It means the collecting of information about the Earth's surface without being in direct contact. So that is remotely, which is done via satellites, drones, or aircrafts. So actually, what the satellites does, satellites actually capture the data in the form of multispectral images or radar imagery across different wavelengths of electromagnetic spectrum. Um, Actually, multispectral imagery is just like a normal camera, but it captures a bit more light spectrum than a normal camera, actually. And then comes the radar imagery, which has a bit longer wavelength than usual visible light, and which can provide us additional information to the regular imagery. Then, if we really want to have a very high resolution imagery, then we utilize drone to capture the data or to collect the data. It can also be integrated with LiDAR sensor. LiDAR is actually light detection and ranging, which is specifically used to measure the tree height and estimate the biomass, etc. And then comes the in situ data. Actually, in situ data is collected by direct measurements. For example, in case of forest, direct measurements include the tree height, diameter, crest height, DBH, etc. We also cover soil. Then we also cover different types of vegetation in the area. So now, what is geospatial due diligence and how we utilize Earth observation to do our due diligence for our projects? This is a very essential step in early stage project development, where we use Earth observation data to assess the land eligibility. We also check if the land is suitable for the design project activities or not, and we also assess if there is any risk involved with the project due to project activities or from outside, and then if there is risk involved, what is the potential impact of these risks. So the main goal of our geospatial due diligence is to develop high quality projects while minimizing the risk, and also to ensure positive outcomes for both environment and the local community. So, the very important step of our geospatial due diligence is land use land cover analysis. Now, what is land use land cover analysis? It is actually the representation of the condition on the ground, what is there in the ground at various point of time, which is covering different features such as forest, agriculture, what type of settlements are there. It also covered different types of water bodies, So this is what actually land use land cover assessment is. And with this land use land cover analysis, we check the eligibility of project area. And for example, how we do the eligibility check. For example, if there was, we check if there was any deforestation in the project area which was cut down with the intention to develop a project, for example. So these images is actually an example of one of our project which we did due diligence on, and it was a potential project from Zambia in which we did the due diligence. So in this left top corner, you see the existing land cover of that project site to see what is actually on the ground. Is it forested area? There is no forest. So the green one you see, this is the green one shows a type of vegetation, and the yellow ones indicates that there is some non-forested areas. Then to have a better understanding of what's the type of vegetation, then we do analysis of tree cover extent on a broader scale to also see what is in the ecosystem, what is outside the project area. So here you see the green one shows the tree cover, and the white one shows the non-tree cover area. But while doing this analysis, we found a unique pattern of deforestation. Usually when there is deforestation, it's usually in the form of, it have a specific unique pattern, like in the form of blocks. But here we noticed a very unique pattern, which is in the form of small patches. So to dig deeper, we use very high resolution imagery and also did some literature to review to see what exactly is happening on the ground, and to see if the project activities that we are planning to do, is it applicable or not. So what we did with the literature and with using high resolution imagery, we noticed that it is actually a practice used by the local community, a slash and burn technique, which they use for their subsistence agriculture. So the community, the local community, is completely dependent on this as a livelihood. So with that, we see that this is something the community is relying on. So now the question was, uh, is it really worth doing our planned project activities, which includes protection of these area, like to stop the community from doing these activities? So with this, we decided that we should not go ahead with this project, because the project activities includes protection of the project area and will certainly influence the community from subsistence agriculture practices, which might affect their livelihood and also create conflicts. Other than this, that was one major reason that we didn't go ahead with this project. So now here is another example of eligibility assessment for a project in which the main goal was to see the eligibility criteria, also to check the additionality, if the project is additional or not, and also to check the performance of the project. So this includes the historical land use assessment. In the previous one, we just did to see what is existing, what is the current land use of the project area. But now here we did the historical land use land cover assessment, that is way back on time in 2003 to 2023, that we will see in the other images. So the green one here is similar to the previous one. The green one indicates the vegetation, maybe forest, and the yellow one in the surroundings that you see is non-forested areas. Then after a few years, in 2008, we see that the non-forested area, the yellow patches, has increased significantly. And then in 2023, we see a distinct like a pattern in which you see the deforestation is occurring in the form of lines, which indicates that these are actually the deforestation has done to create some kind of roads. And then in the next image in 2017, we see that the deforestation really started alongside the roads that they built, or they cut the trees to build roads. And then we see the deforestation really increase alongside the roads. Here is a very clear image from 2019. And then you see the deforestation has significantly increased and covering the whole region. So in the recent image, we can see that almost half of the region has been deforested. Here we can see that the roads were built in the whole project area, which gives us an indication that these roads were built for timber harvesting or extraction of wood. So this also gives us an early indication that if there are some roads being built, that can indicate that in the future there might be some potential deforestation in the area. Okay, so another critical aspect of due diligence is assessing the natural hazards risks. These risks may be wildfires in the forest, it can be hurricanes or cyclones, flood or drought. So these are actually the natural phenomena. But with the climate change, these events is occurring very frequently, and it also increase the risk for our project activities. So by identifying these risks early, we can develop mitigation strategies which can guide us on project management decisions to ensure the success of the project. So on the right side, you can see this is one example of an area where there is a high potential of frost risk. This shows that the plants that are susceptible to frost may have high mortality due to frost in these regions. Frost usually occur in cold air pools, therefore the areas in cold air pooling is most likely are mapped in this step. So we see the yellow ones are the one a bit moderate risk, and then the red ones are very high risk. But for project implementation, we avoid these areas, or we plan the activities accordingly. So we didn't plant the trees which is susceptible to frost, but we plant different species, or we completely avoid these areas. So, okay, now the project is eligible, the land is suitable, we assess the risk. Now the project is implemented. What we do is project monitoring now. Using remote sensing tools, we can track the progress of project activities. For example, we assess the mortality rate, also to see the health of vegetation using remote sensing tools. So based on the mortality rate assessment, we can identify areas which need specific intervention, which ensures that the project stay on track and achieve their intended outcome. So this is one image or one example of how we utilize Earth observation in our project monitoring, or to see how the barren land has been transitioned into a forest land. So in this one, the reddish area, we see that this indicates some barren land, and then the light greenish, maybe some other type of vegetation, can be grassland or something else. Sorry. So this is the monitoring, or this image is taken from in 2016, and then after 1 year after doing the project activities, we see that the barren land has been transitioned into vegetation, or the dark green also indicates a bit of forest. So there the barren land is almost transformed into some kind of forestry vegetation. And then a year after, then we see that even like the areas which was light green now is completely green, which indicates that the barren land has completely transitioned into a forest land. And then it goes on, and then in the end of like our monitoring period, we see in 2021 almost all the area is now completely transitioned into a forest. So now, to verify our analysis that we did in the previous steps, and also to monitor the project activities, we collect in situ data using drones, in-house designed apps. So this is one image from our field visit last year, in which we monitor the project activities using drone. Drone has been very useful because you can't really cover the whole area, but you can fly the drone and assess the whole area, how the project activities is going on, if it's successful or not, yeah, are we on track achieving the objective or not. So that's is very useful. So this is another example. Here, Angela, our project developer, is monitoring the health of plantation and collecting data in the app. We assess the health of vegetation using different indicators. That is designed for specific tree species. For bamboo, it's different. For spectrum, it's different. And then based on that, we see what is the health of the vegetation, and then we take decisions accordingly. So to summarize our geospatial due diligence approach, it gives us a data-backed and technology-driven insight into the project development. It also ensures that the land is suitable for project development and aligned with the project goals. It helps us identify the risk and mitigate the potential risk associated with the project. And with regular monitoring, we ensure that the projects stay on track and achieve their intended outcomes. So I hope this webinar has given you a clear understanding of how Earth observation and geospatial due diligence has been used. And now I will hand it over to Elena. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Usman. Yeah, so I think the work that Usman's team does is so exciting, but also so important for us to ensure the quality of our projects. I will now kind of bring it all together by talking about practically what that looks like, how we work with our clients, and what different types of involvement there are. But I just wanted to say a big thank you for many, many questions. We will leave a few minutes at the end to answer the questions. But there was one question I saw coming from a few different people, so I just want to quickly address it. And it was a very good question, and that was, is the bamboo indigenous species for Rwanda? And I think it's a really important question. And as part of our design of the project, we absolutely start by looking at what would be the best solution to the problem that we're trying to solve. So bamboo is actually a naturalized species, which means it's not indigenous, but it has been in Rwanda for a long time. It's also non-invasive species, but what I think is really important here is why we're using clamping bamboo. And the reason why we're using clamping bamboo is because out of all the different technologies that were tested to solve this problem for the community, which is to bind the soil quickly, to provide these buffer zones quickly, to prevent the flooding and the landslides, that technology was found to be most effective. So although it's not a native species, it's a naturalized non-invasive species, so it doesn't cause any harm at all to the biodiversity. It actually solves a really important problem there. So this is a really good point about sort of looking at these projects, because absolutely as the first priority you should look at native species projects, but in some cases it could be actually a species like this clamping bamboo, which solves the problem better than anything else without causing any harm as well. So thank you for those questions. Please keep them coming, and I'll try to cover the next section really comprehensively, but also leave a few minutes for questions. But just be sure, if we don't get to your question today, I will personally write to you with a response. So please keep asking, even if we don't get a chance to answer all of them. So what I want to talk about is how we actually work with our clients. And the good news is that we have many different solutions for a company, depending on things like their time, the time frame, the budget, their vision, and climate goals. Some companies that we work with just want to make a one-off contribution to a climate project. And that could look in a number of different ways. It could be a spot or forward credit purchase, or it could be just a monetary contribution towards one of our projects, because not all of our projects are actually carbon projects. We have many others, like plastic projects, many different ones that are not even related to carbon. So that's one way. It could be sort of a one-off or a recurring contribution, but not sort of a long-term commitment. The other way that many of our clients work with us is a long-term investment in a project. So what that looks like typically is we have this long-term partnership for the duration of the project's lifetime, which, as I've mentioned, could be 10 years, could be 40 years, or everything in between, where they actually invest in an exclusive share of our total project. So we might have a, let's say, 10,000 hectare project, and they just invest in a share of those hectares. And in return for that investment, they get full access to the carbon stream that comes from those hectares for the duration of that project. So that's the part that I want to talk about a little bit more, because we're getting more and more interest in this solution. But I think most companies are still more familiar with the sort of one-off contributions for the forward purchase. So let's talk a little bit more about why companies that we work with actually want this 10, 15, 30, 40-year commitment and investing in that right to receive that carbon stream for the duration of that project. And there are many, many, many reasons for that. But ultimately, what it comes down to is many of the companies we work with are really concerned about greenwashing accusations, and they want to be very, very close to the project. And having your own project helps you get that enhanced oversight and transparency. So with all those steps of the project development lifecycle that we went through, the clients that invest get quarterly or annual reports where they get reports on the impact programs, mortality counts. They get reports including our Earth observation data, as Usman has told you about. So they get really, really close to understanding what's happening on the ground. And not only that, most of our clients go and visit the project before they invest. And if they've done all the due diligence, usually visiting the project is the last step. And when they visit the project, see the forest growing, see the impact that it's making in the local communities, that usually makes a huge difference, and it makes it feel very, very tangible. It can be a really good match to your brand. We have a variety of different projects, different technologies, different regions. And, many of the clients we work with like to invest in the region where their value chains are, whether it's South Africa or India. And that could be really, really exciting. We can get even closer, and I'll show you a really cool example of that at the end of the webinar today, where you could really have the story of the project resonate with the story of your brand and what your company does. It's a really great way to really accelerate that global contribution to net zero and position yourself as a climate leader. And of course, with the various regulatory requirements and guidelines and obligations, it helps with having some concrete evidence of your contribution in the space. From a financial perspective, the reason why companies do it is because they have the net zero goals, and what they want to do is to lock in the quality, the price, and the volume of the high quality carbon removals for many years. And the reason why they want to do that is because, as many of you are aware, there are many different things happening at the moment in the global carbon markets. There are obviously the net zero commitments from various corporates. We all know about that. But what many people don't realize is how large a role the compliance markets are starting to play here as well. So we've got things like COSIA, which is the aviation scheme, which is the scheme by the aviation scheme and the authority, where the government, basically airlines, would have to either invest into sustainable aviation fuel or get involved in voluntary carbon markets and invest in qualifying projects. You have many compliance markets in different countries, such as South Africa, Singapore, Korea, Colombia, which are actually allowing some projects from the voluntary carbon markets to count towards those carbon taxes liabilities. So there's a lot of things happening in the carbon market at the moment, where there's a strong indication from various analysts that the quality and the supply of high quality removals is going to be quite constrained. And of course, when you have high demands and constrained supply, what we're going to see is quite a high growth in prices. And the companies that we're working with that need those, those high quality credits for their climate goals, they think that it makes a lot of sense to lock that supply in. And that's why they would invest in carbon projects. Can you? So, before we jump into a case study, I wanted to quickly mention a little bit more about us and what makes us maybe a little bit different to the other project developers. So as I mentioned, we invest in our projects and we get them to the point where they're about to start issuing, which de-risks a lot of the issues. I think what's most important about us is we go beyond carbon. So each and every one of our projects really focuses on community impacts. We've got projects, for example, in India, where through planting native trees, that serve as host trees to the wild silkworms, we established this whole silk value chain and employ over 5,000 people, with 90% of them being Indigenous women. So we really focus on the impact on the ground, not just on the environment, but on the communities. And we're also radically transparent. So to all of our clients, we disclose our costs, exactly what part of their investment goes on the ground, how much of it goes towards the internal cost, and so on. But just to bring it all together, what I really wanted to do today is share with you like a real case study. And I will share with you a video in a second. But before I do, I wanted to explain why I've used the Rwanda Bamboo Project as the project to showcase today. So that will be the project that the client from our case study has invested in. The client that we will be hearing from is called the Brook Group. And some of you may already have heard of them. They're based in Switzerland, but they're a global company and are absolute global leaders in innovative infrastructure solutions. So they have a number of different business lines, but just one example is they have a business line that does all the ropes for iconic European cable cars. For example, Germany's Zugspitze, they've done those ropes, and many, many other cable cars at the ski resorts. If you ski in Europe, they would have built as well. But the part of the business that's particularly interesting is called Geobrook. And what they do is they build those steel wire fences that you see if you drive along alpine roads in Europe. And those wire fences are supposed to protect the roads from rockfalls, avalanches, and landslides. So this particular company, the Brook Group, have been clients of ClimatePartner, the broader ClimatePartner group, for a while. So we started with calculating their footprint and helping them set up their reduction pathways. But very early on, they realized that they really wanted to make a really big impact. And when they heard about our Rwanda Bamboo Project, it really, really resonated for them. Because, if you think about what we do there in Rwanda with the bamboo, protecting the local communities against the river flooding, is very similar to what they do with their Geobrook business, with their wire fences and protecting local communities against natural hazards. So, they went and visited the project, and they were very excited to invest in the project. And now it's been going for a little while. And I can keep talking because I obviously find this very exciting, but I think it's better that you hear from Stefan, who is the CEO of the Brook Group. So I will play a video for you where he explains what they did there, why they did it, and what the experience has been like.
Brook Group is happy to partner with ClimatePartner Impact in the Rwanda Bamboo Project. First of all, it was very important to us to do a measurable project with carbon emission removal. And this means growing something. And the combination of growing bamboo and help to stop erosion was a perfect combination to us, because erosion control, natural hazard protection is in the heart of the Brook Group, and it's the core of the Geobrook business with erosion controls, slope stabilization, rockfall protection and other measures against natural hazards. And the partnership together with ClimatePartner Impact is allowing us to really co-develop the project together. Sustainability is anchored in our values. That's very, very important, first of all. But second, sustainability is also part of our global strategy. We want to share this together with partners and our clients because we truly believe that's part of a long-term future in infrastructure. The ClimatePartner Group was already partnering with us in the past. And therefore, it was more than logic when we evaluated potential partners for this journey that we also had a deeper look into the existing partner. And then we were checking over several months how this could develop, how are their values, how are our values. And in the end, it was a total match and we're very happy. Look, we could have bought from anybody some certificates, but that's not really the way we wanted to do it. We wanted to have a long-term impact that we can also steer ourselves. We wanted to go beyond carbon. We wanted to have additional benefits for the local communities, also on the S of the ESG and not only the E. And we believe that this co-benefiting is really a key success factor for the long-term target of this project. I believe there should be a certain match with your strategy, with your vision, with your overall goals. But beside all these factors, you must feel comfortable with the people behind the company, but also all the surrounding partners. And that makes a strong partnership in the long run. What was convincing was the overall view and the overall strategy on both sides where we had a big match. The dedication that we could feel from ClimatePartner Impact, that goes to your heart, goes to your mind. We had 2 people even that went down there to check everything. And what they saw there was exactly what was promised. But they realized there is really much more in this project. The people, they saw women involved too. And how much the local population loves the project because it helps them to protect their fields and to protect the riverbeds. And that was really adding to the total value of just carbon footprint reduction.
Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed this video and it really brought it to life as one example of how we work with our clients. We have maybe just a couple of minutes for questions. So we won't take all the questions, unfortunately, during this time. But what I do promise to you that is within the next week, I will personally get back to those of you that haven't had their questions answered and get back to you. But one question that came through that I think is maybe worth just throwing to Usman while we have you here, Usman, is what is the most rewarding part of your job? What do you like the most?
It's a nice question actually. The thing is, it always fascinates me to look after different projects and see how the project is doing, how the project is performing, and what are the associated risks. So for me, it's always something new to work on. It's very interesting to check these projects and specifically to see how these projects all are achieving its objective, how it is supporting the community and how impactful these are. And it's very interesting, especially when you visit the site and then you see how it was before, because we can see it back in time using remote sensing images. And then when you go and see actually how it was before and how it is transforming into to a forested area or the way we want it, and it really is very satisfying. So that's something I really like about my job.
Super cool. Thank you. And just a cool bit of information about Usman before he started working for us. He worked for WWF, and he had to go to Taliban-controlled areas of Pakistan to monitor some projects. So the guy is really committed to nature. Just so that you know, we're running out of time. We have a couple of really good questions. Martin's asking if we have projects in Europe. The answer is yes, but I will reach out. I will personally contact everyone whose questions we haven't answered. Thank you so much for your time. An hour of your time is really valuable. We really hope you learned something new. And of course, we would love to chat to you if you want to learn more about what we do, how we do it, and if you're interested in learning more about our really broad project portfolio. Please do get in touch. Thank you very, very much for attending. And we'd love to keep talking. Thank you so much. And until next time.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you.